Secondly, notice audacious ignorance. Verse 17 and 18, now brothers, I know that you acted in ignorance, as did your leaders, but this is how God fulfilled what he had foretold through all the prophets, saying that this, his Christ, would suffer. Now that he's laid indictment at their feet, he builds some fraternity with them. He says, now brothers. He puts himself in the ditch with them. It's a good habit to be in if you're a preacher, not to stand on Mount Sinai and scream at people in the valley about what wicked sinners they are, especially if your name is Peter, because he's in very good company as one who has not only audacious, but has made some incredible mistakes due to his own ignorance. But he puts himself down there with them. He deprecates. He humbles himself and says, now brothers, it was foolish what you did, but you acted in ignorance, as did your leaders. I think it's kind of funny, actually, that he gets away with saying this without anybody getting upset. You're just being ignorant. You were just ignorant. You acted in ignorance when you crucified Jesus. And Jesus knew they were acting in ignorance because that was his prayer from the cross. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. They're ignorant of what they're doing. The Apostle Paul says the same thing of himself later on in the book of 1 Timothy. He says, even though I was once a blasphemer and a persecutor and a violent man, I was shown mercy because I acted in ignorance and unbelief. Peter says the same thing in his epistle, 1 Peter 1:14, as obedient children, do not conform to the evil desires you had when you lived in ignorance. Faith and ignorance are polar opposites of each other. Peter has a lot of street cred when it comes to being audacious. Ignorance is not a legitimate defense in our courtrooms, but it is in the courtroom of God. He forgives the ignorant. He restores the ignorant. He sets aside their guilt when they act in ignorance. But ignorance is not just not knowing information. It's not just, well, I didn't know the law when I broke it. Our justice system says we don't care if you know the law or not. You knowing the law and the law existing are not mutually exclusive. Just because you don't know it doesn't mean it doesn't apply to you. This happens to us all the time. Every time I get a speeding ticket, the first thing I say is, where was the sign that said it was 45? I didn't see that. Yeah, you passed it 500 feet ago. Oh, man. Your ignorance is not an excuse. Ignorance is not just not knowing information. In the case of this and the crucifixion in Jesus Messiah, it's not knowing the person of God. Ignorance is unbelief. Ignorance is not knowing God himself. Because I don't know if you've experienced this in your life or not, but you can know the rules about God. You can know religious rules and customs and all that kind of stuff and never really know God at all. You can know information about God all the livelong day and get degrees in it. It doesn't mean you actually know him. On the other hand, you can not know all the rules, but when you know the heart of God, somehow the rules seem to kind of come through. You seem to kind of obey. You understand what I'm saying? God fulfilled what he had foretold, Peter said. And what did he foretell? That Christ, his Christ, would suffer. We have to be very careful here. It doesn't say prophecy was just fulfilled. It wasn't random chance. It wasn't luck. It wasn't some impersonal force. It wasn't human beings cooperating with what a prophet foretold. It says that God fulfilled what he had foretold. Fulfilled is very much like you might think. It's when you fill a coffee cup or a tea glass up. It's still a tea glass, but it's not full-filled. When I go out to eat, I don't like half-filled. I like full-filled. When I go to Starbucks and pay $4.50 for a cup of coffee, you better fill it all the way up, even though I'm going to go over and dump some of it out because it's too strong and I need to put about 6 ounces of cream in it. I want it to be full-filled, not half-filled or half-empty. God is the one that fulfilled. He's the primary mover and motivator. He's the one doing this. And what did he fulfill? What was it he foretold? That Jesus would suffer. His Christ would suffer. It's important that you know that Jesus didn't suffer just because we sinned. He didn't just suffer and die because we sinned. He suffered and died because that's what God wanted. That's the plan that he had, and the only plan that he had to redeem his people. So I've got a rather obvious but good, I think, principle for you. Human ignorance wasn't in the driver's seat at the cross. Divine sovereignty was. Ignorance was not in the driver's seat at the cross. sovereignty was. So I don't know how many of you are 80s and 90s children, but Toonsis the Driving Cat was one of my favorite sketches on Saturday Night Live, and they would always have these guest stars come on, and they'd have this cat, Toonsis the Driving Cat, the cat who could drive a car, and they would have these wonderful conversations, and this married couple would be in the front seat, and Toonsis would be driving them on their date or something, and they would say, isn't it nice to have a cat that can drive the car, and we can just sit here and have a conversation, and the next thing you know, oh no, Toonsis, look out! And Toonsis drives the car off the cliff. Toonsis the Driving Cat, right? Ignorance was not in the driver's seat at the cross. Sovereignty was. My dad had a fishing buddy when I was growing up, and one time he and his fishing buddy were in my dad's Volkswagen, one of those 1968 Volkswagen classic, bug cars, and they're driving through this very narrow dirt road in the woods, going to their fishing hole. And he was driving along, and he was going too fast, about 40 miles an hour through this very thing. He says, the leaves were brushing up against the car on both sides, and they come to a fork in the road. And my dad said, left, and the guy goes, right. And he turns the car hard to the right and goes running off right into the middle of the woods. No road, just ramped off out into the woods in the bog, What he meant to say was correct, not right. Left, yes, not right. Ignorance is sometimes in the driver's seat. I used to think, because I'm kind of OCD, I like to be in control of everything around me and people around me, and I used to think at some point I started to get a little bit jaded, because when I became a pastor I thought, I've got all these people in the church that are volunteering, and I got to make sure I'm in control of all of them and tell them what to do. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. And so then I went into refuge mode, and I said, I can't control everybody. I can only control me. And so I'm going to control me. And I'm going to work hard myself, and I'm going to set a good example, and everybody else will just go, aha, that's what I'm supposed to do, and they'll do like I do, and I'll set that example, and I'll be in control of me. And how much of me am I in control of? I'm in control of all of me. I'm the preacher, I'm the priest, I'm all these things I got to be, and I'm going to be in control of all that stuff. And then I was in a car accident and hurt my back. And they put me on some medicine, and I found out my control of me was an illusion. I wasn't even in control of me. I thought I could control my sermons. I thought I could control studying the Bible and getting up. I could be responsible to do that, and I was in control of that. That's all I could be in control of. The music could go off a cliff. Testimonies could go off a cliff. Deacons might go off a cliff because they're being driven by the elders. I don't know. But I could be in control of my part. And then I found out, you think you're in control of that? You're not even in control of that. God's in control of it, but not you. And the amazing thing about God is that he factors in human ignorance into his plan. You might even say he not only just makes a little room for it, he plans on it. It's not just, whoops, they messed it up big time. Wish they hadn't done that. I hadn't foreseen that they'd be ignorant and nail him to the cross the way they did. Oh no. It's part of his plan. His sovereignty makes room for human ignorance, but it doesn't mean that human ignorance was in the driver's seat at the cross. God's sovereignty was. Who's in the driver's seat of your life?